The chandelier above the Grand Hanok ballroom of the Lotte Signiel in Jamsil was rumored to weigh more than a small Hyundai sedan. 18,000 pieces of hand-cut Austrian crystal suspended over the 63rd floor of Seoul on the warmest Saturday in May of 2026, and beneath it stood Kang Taiwan, 47 years old, Oyabun of the Dagon Group in everything but the word, watching his only daughter Kang Jian cross a stage in a white dress and a gold stole to receive her diploma from Seoul National University with the highest honors in international law, when the rear service door opened the way a wound opens, slow and without sound, and a woman in a deep indigo aso OK wrapper with gold thread. At the hem walked through it carrying a leather portfolio against her chest the way a soldier carries a flag, and Taewon, who had buried this woman 12 years and 7 months ago in a closed cedar coffin on Jeju Island with 140 mourners and a priest from Myeongdong Cathedral and a death certificate stamped by Severance Hospital, felt the crystal flute of Krug Clos d'Ambonnet in his right hand crack along its stem without breaking, the champagne running down his wrist and into the cuff of a Brioni jacket that cost more than the annual salary of every server in the room combined, and his mother, Madame Kang Hyo-jin, 71 years old, 4'11", in the same Mikimoto pearl earrings she had worn the day her husband was shot through the throat in front of the Blue House gates in 1994, set down her teacup on a saucer of Celadon porcelain and said in the low Gyeongsang dialect she only used when she intended to kill someone that this was not possible, but it was possible. It was, in fact, the only thing in that ballroom that was real. The woman walked the length of the parquet floor without hurrying, past the Minister of Justice, past the chairman of Samsung Life, past the 3 Dagon lieutenants who reached for jackets they had forgotten they were no longer allowed to carry weapons under, and she stopped 6 paces from the small reception platform, where Taiwan stood frozen with his hand bleeding pink champagne onto white marble. She was 39 years old now. There were 2 new lines at the corners of her mouth, and 1 silver strand at her left temple, and she wore no jewelry except a simple gold band on the 4th finger of her right hand. The African hand, the marriage hand, the one Taiwan had placed it on in a courtyard in Abeokuta in October of 2013, under a canopy of palm fronds, while her grandmother spoke a blessing in Yoruba so old that even her own mother had to ask for the translation. Jian, who had just turned 22, who had been raised on the lie that her mother died in a car accident on the Olympic Expressway 6 weeks after her 10th birthday, stood at the top of the platform in her graduation gown, holding her diploma, and looking down at the indigo wrapper, and the gold band, and the face she did not remember, and yet recognized in the way the body recognizes the first language it ever heard. Madame Kang stood up from her seat. Her bodyguards moved 1 step forward. The room held 312 people, 4 cameras from Chosun Ilbo, 2 from JTBC, and not one of them made a sound. The woman in the indigo wrapper opened the leather portfolio with the patience of a surgeon opening a chest cavity, took out a single sheet of cream-colored paper, and laid it on the marble at Taewon's feet without bending her knees, the way one lays a wreath on a grave one has not been allowed to visit. Then she lifted her eyes to him, and in a voice that did not shake, that had not shaken in 12 years and 7 months, that had learned not to shake in 3 different countries, and 4 different kitchens, and 1 studio apartment in Houston, where she had once eaten plain rice for 9 days so her daughter could have chicken, she said the sentence that would be clipped onto 200 million phones before the sun rose over Namsan the next morning. I came back for the same reason I left Taiwan, because someone in this family still believes our daughter deserves the truth. The Minister of Justice set down his glass. Madame Kang sat down again very slowly, the way old bones sit when they have just understood that the room they have ruled for 32 years has, in 1 sentence, been taken from them, and Jian, on the platform, in the white dress with the diploma in her hand, said 1 word in a voice no one in the Dagon group had ever heard her use, a Yoruba word her body had carried in some buried chamber of memory for 12 years, like a seed waiting for the rain. She said, "Aya." Mother, if you are already feeling this, if your chest is doing that thing where it tightens before you have given it permission, then pause for 1 second and tap subscribe to Midnight Love Saga. Because what happens in the next 30 minutes is going to break your heart in 4 places and then put it back together with something stronger than it was before. Stay with me. The truth is only just walking through the door. You need to go back. 13 years and 2 months. to a private dining room on the 42nd floor of the Mandarin Oriental in Lagos, on Victoria Island, on a Thursday in March of 2013, where Kang Tae-won, then 34 years old, then still the second son of the Dagon Group, then still the one his father called the soft one, with a mouth that meant the opposite of soft, was attempting to close a $412 million acquisition of a Nigerian shipping concern called Aderonke Maritime, founded in 1971 by a woman named Chief Aderonke Bamidele, whose granddaughter, 26 years old, 2 degrees from the London School of Economics, 1 from the Lagos Business School, sat across the table from him in a tailored white Agbada-cut blazer with her grandmother's gold beads at her throat and corrected him, in front of his 3 Dagon lieutenants and the Korean ambassador to Nigeria on his own bid. "Mr. Kang," she said, in an English that had been polished on 3 continents and softened back into Lagos on purpose, "your offer of $412 million is generous, but it is also incorrect. You have priced our fleet at the post-2011 valuation. You have not adjusted for the Cabotage Act amendments of January. Your team is undervaluing us by $68 million, and I would rather you know that now than discover it in a courtroom in 2 years. My grandmother did not build this company so that a Korean conglomerate could buy it for less than it is worth. So please, adjust the number, or finish your coffee and fly home." His lieutenants did not breathe. Tae-won, who had been raised on the assumption that no woman in a business meeting had ever been the smartest person in the room, looked at her for a long moment, and then he laughed, once low, surprised, and he adjusted the number. Her name was Oluwaseyi Bamidele. The family called her Seyi. She was the only granddaughter of Chief Aderonke, the great-granddaughter of a woman who had hidden Biafran children in a rice store in 1968, and she had not come to Lagos to fall in love with a Korean man with a Brioni suit and a quiet mouth, and a bodyguard who pretended to be a translator. She had come to sell her grandmother's company at the correct price and go home to her cat and her mother and her dissertation on maritime arbitration. But Taiwan stayed in Lagos for 9 more days. On the 3rd day, she took him to a buka in Surulere, where the jollof rice came smoke-blackened from a clay pot the size of a truck tire, and he ate 3 plates and asked in Korean for the recipe, and she translated his Korean into Yoruba for the woman at the pot, and the woman at the pot laughed and said in English that no Korean man had ever asked her for a recipe, and that he could have it on the condition that he learned to say thank you in Yoruba before he left. He said it. "Ese." She corrected his tone. He said it again. The woman at the pot blessed him on the forehead with her wooden spoon. On the 6th day, Sei took him to Abeokuta to meet her grandmother, who was 89 years old and almost blind, and who held his face in both her papery hands for a full minute before she said in Yoruba that this one had a quiet inside him that had not yet been broken, and that he was going to break it himself if he was not careful, and that her granddaughter was going to be the one to either save him or finish the job. On the 9th day, in a courtyard in Abeokuta, under a canopy of palm fronds, with 11 of Sei's elders present, and not one person from the Dagon Group, Taiwan married her under Yoruba customary law, with a gold band that Sei's grandmother slid onto her own finger, and then onto Sei's, with a blessing spoken over their joined hands by a babalawo in a white robe, and Taiwan, who had been taught from the age of 7 that marriage was a corporate transaction signed on a san letterhead, repeated his vows in a Yoruba he had memorized phonetically the night before, and when he reached the line that meant, "From this day forward, your people are my people," his voice broke for the first time in his adult life. They lived secretly for 14 months. He flew to Lagos every 6 weeks. He learned to braid her hair badly. She learned to make kimchi from his mother's recipe, which his mother had never given her, which he had recovered in fragments from the family cook over 3 phone calls in the middle of the night. Jian, whose Yoruba name was Oluwaseyi after her mother, and whose Korean name was Jian, after Taiwan's grandmother on his father's side, was born in a private clinic in Ibadan on November the 19th, 2013, at 4:12 in the morning, and Taiwan was in the room, and he cut the cord, and he wept the way a man weeps when he understands for the first time that his entire previous life has been a rehearsal. And then, on the 2nd of January 2014, Taiwan's father, Kang Min-soo, chairman of the Dagon Group, died of a stroke in his bedroom at the family estate in Hanam-dong at the age of 73. Madam Kang found the photographs in his desk drawer 8 days later, the wedding in Abeokuta, the baby in the clinic in Ibadan, the Yoruba marriage certificate with a notary stamp from Ogun State. She did not call her son. She called her lawyer. And then she called her second lawyer. And then she called a man named Park Do-sik, who had worked for the Dagon Group since 1991, and who specialized in problems that could not appear in newspapers. In February of 2014, on a Tuesday in a hotel room at the Echo Hotel in Lagos, Park Do-sik sat across from Seyi Bamidele and her grandmother and her mother and the family lawyer, and he slid across the table a cashier's check for $4 million United States dollars and a non-disclosure agreement in 3 languages and a sentence in Korean, which the translator rendered as, "You will sign this, you will return the child to her father's family for proper raising, and you will never make contact with Kang Tae-won again. If you do not sign, the Dagon Group will, within 90 days, ensure that your grandmother's company no longer exists, that your mother's clinic in Ikoyi no longer has a license, and that you, personally, no longer have a passport that any country will honor." Seiyi's grandmother, 89 years old, almost blind, reached across the table without speaking, took the check, and tore it in half. Then she tore the halves in half. Then she handed the 4 pieces back to Park Do-sik, and she said in English slowly, so that he would not need a translator, "The child stays with her mother. The mother stays with her people. And you will tell that woman in Seoul that we do not sell our blood for paper." Seiyi did not cry. She stood up. She lifted her sleeping daughter from her mother's arms, and she walked to the door. Then she turned back and she looked at Park Do-sik the way her grandmother had looked at Biafran soldiers in 1968, and she said the sentence that would haunt Kang Tae-won for the next 12 years and 7 months. The sentence he would replay in 3 different time zones, in the back of 3 different cars, in the dark of 4 different bedrooms. Tell him to look at me when he decides what kind of father he wants to be, and then tell him that by the time he is brave enough to look, I will already be gone. 2 weeks later, on the 17th of February 2014, an SUV registered to the Bamidele family was found burned to a chassis on the Lagos-Ibadan expressway. 2 bodies inside, charred beyond dental identification. A woman's gold band was recovered from the wreckage and flown by diplomatic pouch to Seoul. Madame Kang placed it in a velvet box in the family safe. She told her son his wife and his daughter had been killed by armed robbers on a rural road in a country she had warned him about. She produced a death certificate from Severance Hospital, signed by a doctor who was paid 600 million won and who emigrated to Vancouver the following spring. Taiwan buried the box on Jeju Island under a small stone with no name. He did not speak for 41 days. When he spoke again, the Dagon Group had a new oyabun, and he had a face like a closed door, and his mother said to her sister-in-law over tea that the soft one had finally hardened, and she had said it the way a woman says a thing she had been waiting 30 years to say. But Seiyi and Jian had not been in the SUV. The grandmother, who had survived a civil war by knowing what wealthy men do when they are embarrassed, had put her granddaughter and her great-granddaughter on a midnight Lufthansa flight to Frankfurt 9 hours before the SUV burned, with 2 passports in different names, and 1 carry-on bag, and 4,000 euros sewn into the lining of a baby blanket. They went to Houston. They went because the grandmother had a cousin who ran a tailoring shop in the 3rd Ward, and because Seiyi had a friend from LSE, who was now an immigration attorney in Harris County. Seiyi worked the night desk at a Hampton Inn off the Katy Freeway for 2 years. Then she sat for the Texas bar by means of foreign credential evaluation, and she passed it on the first try, and she joined a small black women-owned maritime law firm in downtown Houston, and within 6 years, she was a partner. She raised Jian in a 2-bedroom apartment that smelled of agusi soup on Sundays and doenjang jjigae on Wednesdays, because she had decided, on the 3rd night in Houston, that her daughter would not lose either of her 2 languages, either of her 2 grandmothers, either of her 2 names. She told Jian that her father had been a kind man who died before she was born. It was the only lie she ever told her, and she told it because she had been raised by a woman who taught her that some lies are a roof you put over a small child until the child is tall enough to step out from under it on her own. In November of 2025, Jian, then 21, then a 3rd-year law student at the University of Houston, came home one afternoon with a swollen lymph node under her left ear and a bruise on her shin she did not remember earning. And 3 weeks later, on the 14th of December, a pediatric oncologist at MD Anderson named Dr. Amara Okafor sat across from Seiyi in a small gray office and said the words acute myeloid leukemia and the words bone marrow transplant. And the words, the donor registry shows a 0.4% match rate for patients of mixed Korean and Yoruba ancestry, and the words, we need to find her biological father. Sei went home that night. She sat on the edge of her bathtub for 2 hours. She washed her face. She picked up her phone. She booked a one-way ticket to Seoul. She did not call ahead. She did not write a letter. She walked into the Lotte Signal ballroom on the day she knew Kang Ji-an would receive her diploma, because she had decided on the flight from Houston that whatever happened next would happen in front of witnesses, in front of cameras, in front of the woman who had once handed her a check for $4 million and a sentence about her grandmother's company. She had decided that her daughter would meet her father for the first time inside the same kind of room where her father had once chosen, by his silence, to lose her. And now she stood 6 paces from him with a cream-colored sheet on the marble between them, and the sheet was a buccal swab DNA report from Quest Diagnostics in Houston, processed on the 12th of April, 2026, and the result line read 99.9997% paternal match, and beneath it, paperclipped, was a letter from Dr. Amara Okafor of MD Anderson Cancer Center, requesting urgent HLA typing of the biological father of patient Kang Ji-an Bamidele, born November the 19th, 2013, in Ibadan, Oyo State, Federal Republic of Nigeria. Taiwan looked at the paper. He looked at the woman. He looked at his daughter on the platform in the white dress. And his knees, which had not bent for any man or any god since the day he buried a cedar box on Jeju Island, bent. He did not fall. He went down deliberately, one knee then the other, onto the white marble of the Lotte Signal ballroom in front of 312 witnesses and 4 cameras. And he did not weep, because he had forgotten how, but his throat moved 3 times before he could speak, and when he did speak, it was not in Korean. It was in the Yoruba he had memorized phonetically 13 years before, the line from his wedding vows, the line that meant, from this day forward, your people are my people. And he said it badly, and he said it once, and Sei did not move toward him, and Sei did not soften, and Sei said only, in a voice that the microphones picked up, and that the JTBC camera caught in full, "Get up, Taiwan! We don't have time. Your daughter is dying." The helicopter from the Lotte Signal rooftop to Asan Medical Center in Songpa took 11 minutes. Taiwan sat across from Sei. Jian sat between them. No one spoke for the first 6 minutes. Then Jian, who had not slept in 2 nights, who had a diploma in a tube on her lap and a bruise on her wrist from an IV 3 days old, looked at the man across from her, and she opened her mouth, and she said in a Korean so textbook perfect it could have been read off a page of the Sejong Institute curriculum. 안녕하세요, 아베오지. 저는 강지안입니다. 만나서 반갑습니다. Hello, father. I am Kang Ji-an. It is a pleasure to meet you. Taiwan broke, not loudly. He turned his face to the helicopter window, and he wept the way a man weeps when he has just been handed back, in one sentence every year he had told himself he had survived without. Sei watched him without moving. She had decided, somewhere over the Atlantic 3 days before, that she would not comfort him. Not yet. Not until. At Asan Medical Center on the 12th floor of the cancer hospital, in a private consultation room with a view of the Han River the color of pewter, Dr. Lee Jun-ho of the Hematology-Oncology Division explained that Jian's 6-month survival probability without a matched transplant was 18%, and with a matched transplant from a haploidentical biological parent could rise to 71. He explained that the HLA typing on Taiwan would take 72 hours. He explained that conditioning chemotherapy would begin within 10 days of a confirmed match. He used the words busulfan and cyclophosphamide and graft versus host. Sei wrote them down in a small leather notebook she had carried from Houston. Taiwan did not write anything. He simply nodded, once, at each sentence, the way a man nods when he is being read his own sentencing. When Dr. Lee left the room, Sei closed her notebook, and she looked at Taiwan across the small white table, and she said, "There are phases." Taiwan said, "Tell me." "Phase 1 is medical," she said. "You will be tested tomorrow. If you are a match, you will donate. You will follow every instruction of Dr. Lee. You will not bring your mother to this hospital. You will not bring your security to this hospital. You will not announce her recovery to the press. She is my daughter first." "Yes," he said. "Phase 2 is financial and legal. You will sign, before any donation, an acknowledgement of paternity under Korean law. You will add her to your registry. You will give her your name if she wants it, and if she does not want it, you will not ask twice. You will pay for nothing she does not ask for. You will not buy her an apartment. You will not buy her a car. You will not put her on the Daegun board. If she wants to be a maritime lawyer in Houston, she will be a maritime lawyer in Houston, and you will fly economy to visit her. Taewon almost smiled. He did not. Yes, he said. Phase 3, Seiyi said, and then she stopped. She looked at the window. The Han River was the color of pewter. Phase 3 is not today. Phase 3 is not this year. Phase 3 is whether the man you become in the next 12 months is a man I can stand next to in a room without my hands shaking. Phase 3 is mine to name. Do you understand? Yes, he said. I understand. She nodded once. She picked up her notebook. She stood up. At the door she turned and she said, And Taewon, look at me. Look at me the way I told that man in Lagos to tell you to look at me. You did not look then. Look now. He looked. He looked at her for a long time. And then he said, in Korean, I have been looking for 12 years and 7 months. I just did not know which direction. She left the room. He sat at the table for 40 minutes without moving. The next morning, at 7 a.m., he walked into his mother's breakfast room at the Hanamdong estate without knocking. Madame Kang was eating soft tofu with a silver spoon her husband had given her on their 30th anniversary. She did not look up. He sat down across from her. He poured himself tea. He drank it. He set the cup down. Then he said, in the low Gyeongsang dialect she had used in the ballroom, Iyama. The death certificate from Severance, the doctor who signed it, the lawyer who handled the check, the cashier's check for $4 million dated February 11th, 2014, the non-disclosure with 3 language versions, the deed of the burial plot on Jeju Island that does not contain a body. I have all of it. I have had all of it for 6 years. I have a recording of Park Dusik, made before he died of liver failure in Vancouver in 2022, in which he names you, by name, as the principal who instructed him. I have an affidavit from the doctor's widow. I have the bank records. I have the cancelled check. I have the 4 pieces of the cashier's check that Seiyi's grandmother tore in half twice, recovered from Park Dusik's safe deposit box at Hana Bank, branch number 0317, box 412, which I emptied in November of 2020. Madame Kang set down her spoon. As of 9 a.m. this morning, he said, your signing authority on the Daegun Group main accounts has been revoked. Your access to the family office in Yeoksamdong has been revoked. The Hanamdong estate, which was placed in your name in 2014 by Park Dusik on a forged codicil to my father's will, has been quietly returned to the trust under the original 2011 instrument, which I have held in a vault at Standard Chartered London since 2019. Your seat on the Daegun Cultural Foundation has been replaced this morning by Mrs. Oluwaseyi Bamidele Kang. Your security detail has been reduced from 12 to 2. You will keep the pearl earrings. You will keep the apartment in Pyeongchangdong. You will keep your dignity in public because Jian should not have to read in the Chosun Ilbo that her grandmother is a murderer. But you will not enter Asen Medical Center. You will not contact my wife. You will not contact my daughter. If you wish to write a letter, you may. I will decide whether it is given. Madame Kang's hand, which had not trembled in 32 years, trembled once. Taewana, she said. One question, he said. Only one. And I want the truth, Aoyama. After all of this, did she ever cash the check? Madame Kang did not answer for a long moment. The tea in his cup was very still. Outside the window, a magpie crossed the lawn. No, she said finally. Her voice was very small. She tore it, 4 pieces. She tore it in front of me, in front of Park. She would not even let her grandmother sign for it. I have known for 12 years, Taewana, that I tried to buy a woman who could not be bought. And I have known for 12 years that my husband, your father, in his last week of life, in the hospital, asked me to find his son's wife in Lagos because he had seen the photographs, and he had wanted, before he died, to meet his granddaughter. I did not tell you. I did not go. I burned the photographs. I have been afraid of that woman for 12 years and 7 months. I'm still afraid of her. I think she is the bravest person I have ever met. Taiwan stood up. He did not touch his mother. He did not raise his voice. Then you and I agree on one thing at last, he said, and he left. The HLA match came back at 61% on the third afternoon, a haploidentical match within the range Dr. Lee had hoped for. Conditioning began on day 11. Jian lost her hair on day 14. Tae-wan donated his marrow on day 21 under general anesthesia in a procedure that left him bruised from the iliac crests to the small of his back for 3 weeks. He sent the bouquet of imported lilies his secretary had pre-ordered back to the florist and replaced it, on Sei's recommendation, with a small bowl of jollof rice from a Nigerian auntie in Itaewon and a clay pot of doenjang jjigae from the family cook, set side by side on Jian's hospital tray on day 23. Jian, weak, bald, 22, ate 3 spoonfuls of each and said in Yoruba that her mother had been right about the doenjang and that her father had been right about the jollof, and Sei laughed for the first time in 12 years and 7 months, and Taiwan, sitting in the corner chair in a hospital sweatshirt, heard the sound and closed his eyes and did not open them for a full minute. Jian was discharged on day 28, in remission, in light-up sneakers her father had bought her at the Lotte department store in Sogong-dong on the recommendation of a 6-year-old in the elevator, because Jian had told him on day 25 that when she was 8, she had wanted light-up sneakers, and her mother had not been able to afford them. Sei did not move into the Hanam-dong estate. She rented a 2-bedroom apartment in Itaewon on a quiet street near the Nigerian embassy, with a small kitchen and a window that caught the afternoon light. Taiwan visited on Wednesdays and Sundays. He brought groceries. He did not stay the night. He paid for nothing that was not asked for. He took a Yoruba lesson every Saturday morning from a tutor Sei's mother recommended over WhatsApp from Lagos, and he was, his tutor reported gently, a slow but determined student. He learned to make egusi soup, badly. He learned to braid Jian's wig for her, badly. He learned, slowly, the difference between a presence and an intrusion. One Wednesday in September of 2026, over a kitchen table set with doenjang jjigae and a small bowl of jollof, Jian, whose hair had grown back in soft black curls a half-inch long, put down her spoon and looked at her parents and asked, in a careful mixture of Korean and Yoruba, whether they were going to be married again, whether they were going to live together, whether she was going to have a family the way the children in her textbooks had a family. Sei answered her first. She reached across the table and she touched her daughter's cheek with the back of her hand, and she said, "Oluwa Sei, listen to me. We were never unmarried. The papers in Lagos were never invalid. The blessing your great-grandmother spoke over us in Abeokuta was never cancelled. The grave on Jeju Island never had me in it. The lie I told you when you were 10 was a roof I put over your head until you were tall enough to stand without it. You are tall enough now. Your father and I have always been married, in Yoruba law, and in my heart, and in the only court that matters. Whether we live in the same apartment is a decision we will make together. But you have always been our daughter. You have always been a family. Do you hear me?" Jian nodded. She did not cry. She picked up her spoon. She kept eating. Taiwan could not speak. He sat at the table with his hands folded in his lap, and Saya looked at him across the small kitchen with the wet plate on the counter, and the rice cooker hissing, and the September light falling across the linoleum, and she smiled. It was a small smile. It was the first one in 12 years and 7 months. It was enough. He came back the following Wednesday. He brought no flowers. He carried a small velvet box. He stood in the kitchen while Sei rinsed a plate. Jian was in the next room with the television on low, playing a video game with the sound turned down out of habit from the hospital. "Sei," he said, "I have loved you for 13 years and 6 months. I was wrong for 12 of them. I was wrong because I let my mother tell me what was real. I was wrong because I did not look at you when you told me to look. I was wrong because when they showed me the certificate from Severance, I believed paper instead of believing what my body had known since the courtyard in Abeokuta. I am offering you no money tonight. I am offering you no estate. I am offering you no Dagon name. I am offering you my name. Just my name. Kang. The one my father wanted to give you in his last week. The one my mother burned the photographs of. The one our daughter already carries. I am asking you on a Wednesday, in this kitchen, with a wet plate between us, to let me wear yours too. Bamidele. I am asking to be Kang Taiwan Bamidele, so that when our daughter signs her name, she sees both her parents in it, in the order her mother earned. He opened the velvet box. Inside was not a diamond. Inside was a thin gold band, the same width as the one her grandmother had once slid onto her finger in Abeokuta, with a single Yoruba word engraved on the inside, in a script so small it could only be read by the person who wore it. The word was Fae, love. Sei looked at the ring. She looked at the man. She looked at the doorway to the next room where her daughter was alive and 22 and humming a song in Korean. Phase 3, she said. And then in English, in the kitchen table English of two people who have been speaking 3 languages between them for 12 years, she said, yes. The second wedding took place on the 17th of October, 2026, in the same courtyard in Abeokuta, under a new canopy of palm fronds, with the same babalawo, now 91 years old, who had spoken the blessing 13 years before. Sei's grandmother had died in 2021, but her photograph sat on a small carved stool to the left of the canopy, and her gold band, the one she had once slid from her own finger, was carried by Jian in a calabash lined with indigo cloth. The Daegun group sent 22 relatives, including Taiwan's youngest aunt, who had spent 4 months learning the Yoruba response to the marriage blessing and who delivered it on the day with a Gyeongsang accent so heavy that the babalawo laughed and corrected her gently, and the whole courtyard laughed with him. Madame Kang was not invited. She sent, by diplomatic courier from Seoul, a single white chrysanthemum in a wooden box, and beneath the chrysanthemum, on a folded sheet of rice paper, in her own hand, in Korean, were 5 words. I was wrong. Forgive me. Sei kept the chrysanthemum. She did not write back. When Jian asked her, that night, whether she would ever forgive her grandmother, Sei looked at her daughter for a long moment, and she said in Yoruba, some forgiveness has to be earned in years, not in sentences. She has time. So do I. We will see what she does with hers. The photograph that ran on the front page of the Chosun Ilbo, of This Day Lagos, and of the Houston Chronicle the following Monday, was taken at 6:14 in the evening, in the courtyard, just after the babalawo joined the couple's hands for the second time. Taiwan is in a white agbada with gold embroidery at the chest. Sei is in a deeper indigo than the one she wore at the Lotta Signal, with her grandmother's beads at her throat. Jian stands between them, in a wrapper her aunties had tied for her that morning, with her hair grown back in soft curls, and her diploma framed on a small table behind her. The caption ran in 3 languages. In Korean, 가족은 우리가 잃어버렸다고 믿었던 사람들이 우리에게 돌아오는 곳이다. In Yoruba, 이딜레 니 이비티 아원 티 아로 페 아티 파다누 티 인파다 보시 오도 와. In English, family is the place the people we thought we had lost come back to us. A boy raises a glass of Krug under a chandelier and toasts a future he was told to want. A man sets the glass down, lets it crack in his own hand, and walks across a marble floor to meet the future that was always his. The first boy is afraid of his mother. The second man is not afraid of anyone, because the woman who taught him what fear costs is, at last, standing in the same room. And the daughter between them, 22, alive, bilingual, sovereign, carries both her names into the next century, like a torch passed in a courtyard in Abeokuta, from a grandmother to a granddaughter, to a great-granddaughter who learned, before she could walk, that the most expensive lie a powerful family ever tells is the lie that says the woman they exiled was never coming back. So I will ask you only one thing tonight. If you were Oluwaseyi Bamidele, 39 years old, 2 passports, 1 bone marrow registry letter in your hand, 1 daughter dying in Houston, 1 ring still on the 4th finger of your right hand, would you have walked into that ballroom on the 63rd floor of the Lotta Signal? Or would you have let your pride and your grief and the 12 years and 7 months they spent telling you were dead keep you in your kitchen on Almeda Road until the news came that it was too late? Tell me in the comments. Tell me what you would have done. Tell me what your mother would have done. Tell me what your grandmother would have done. And if this story moved something in you, something small, something you did not know was still there, then tap subscribe, Ring the bell and stay with me here at Midnight Love Saga, because we tell the long ones, the slow ones, the ones that earn their tears. Stay soft, stay smart, and remember, the people you abandon in the rain do not always come back to drown you. Sometimes they come back carrying the only piece of you worth saving, in a wrapper of indigo and gold, on a 63rd floor marble floor, on the warmest Saturday in May. I will see you in the next one.